let's bring it back to you because the way you look at your life, especially through self reflection, can transform your past into a tool for your future. Let's talk about how reframing your story can change everything. When you look back at your life, what do you see? Welcome back to the Shattered Mindset podcast, where we explore the pivotal moments that redefine our thinking and set us on new paths. I'm your host, Melvin Larry, and I'm so excited to be here. And let me start with a question. How often do you stop and really think about the way you see the world? You see, life isn't just about the challenges we face, it's about how we see those challenges. And that's where perspective comes in. Perspective is everything. It's the lens we choose to look through, and it has the power to transform obstacles into opportunities and setbacks into stepping stones. Today, we're going to dig into the idea. Well, we'll explore how perspective intersects with perception, how it shapes our relationships, parenting, and self reflection. And here's the key: how it can unlock growth in ways you might not have imagined. So let's jump in and shatter those limiting beliefs together. Let's start by unpacking two concepts that are closely related: perspective and perception. They're connected, but they're not quite the same. And understanding the difference is key. Perception is immediate, it's how we interpret what we see, hear, or experience in the moment. Perspective, on the other hand, is broader. It's the mental framework we build over time, shaped by our experiences, beliefs, and values. Here's a story I shared recently that really illustrates this point. Imagine you're in a store and you see a parent gently but firmly correcting their child. Maybe they said something to the child didn't respond. Maybe they repeated themselves, child really didn't respond. Maybe they got a little strong. Maybe they just had to get a little strong correcting the child. Well, to the parent and the child, it's just another moment, no big deal. Listen, just another moment in their day. Maybe they even left the store afterward and went to get ice cream. No issue, no harm, no foul. But now picture someone across the store who perceives that same moment differently. Maybe they interpret or misinterpret the tone of words or as abusive, so it's their perception, right? And moved by their perception, they take action. They call family and children services. Wow. Fast forward, parent and child go home, no big deal. When the family gets home, family and children services pulls up behind them. They come in and they explain to the family that they've received a report of abuse and they're required to investigate. Even worse, they state that while they're investigating it, that they have to remove all the children from the home. Whoa. Now things escalating, right? Because of someone's perception. Imagine the shock and fear that causes for the family. Anger too, all right? Now, this is just a story, but it shows how quickly perception, when not paired with perspective, can lead to unintended and sometimes dire consequences. Let's think about this for a moment. Okay. How often do we act based solely on what we perceive without stepping back to consider the bigger picture? All right. It happens all the time, doesn't it? Okay. Maybe you're driving and somebody cuts you off. It happens all the time, right? Your immediate perception might be that they were reckless or rude, But what if instead you paused and thought, hmm, what if they're rushing to an emergency or something? I'm actually learning to do that more. I said learning. Okay. So, seriously, though, that small shift from perception to perspective can change the way you react. Now, let's take it one step further. How often do we let our perceptions dictate our actions only to realize later that we were missing context? Think about that story I shared earlier about the observer in the store. What if they had stopped and asked themselves, what's really going on here? How might that have changed their reaction? Here's a takeaway: perception happens instantly. It's a reflex, like touching something hot and pulling your hand back or pulling your hand away. But perspective requires intention. You have to make the effort to pause, to question, and to look beyond the surface. And here's the challenge: the next time you catch yourself reacting based on perception, stop and ask, what's the bigger picture here? Okay. You might be surprised by what you discover. Okay. Now, let's talk about perspective, or how perspective can shift the way we see challenges. Here's where things can get a little interesting. All right. How we choose to see our challenges can make all the difference. Let me share how perspective can completely shift the way we see challenges. This one kind of really hit home for me during the pivotal moment in my career. All right. I remember stepping into a senior management role where everything seemed stacked against me: low morale, underperforming staff, and extremely high expectations from my team and from my leadership. So this operation I came into was performing at number 18 out of 18. Okay. It would have been easy to see the situation as a no-win scenario, but I chose a different perspective and a different path as a result of it. I saw it as an opportunity to grow, not just as a leader, but as a person. Was it easy? Absolutely not. Okay. But here's the thing. All right. I chose to learn. I chose to grow. I chose to embrace the situation. And that shift in perspective didn't just change the outcome, it changed me. It taught me resilience, patience, and the value of leading with vision instead of fear. You know, perception and perspective can shape challenges. All right. Have you ever been in a discussion where someone said, I don't see it that way? All right. Happens all the time. Look, there's a moment where perception and perspective collide, and that's one of them. On the surface, they're expressing their perception, the way they interpret the situation. But if you dig deeper, you'll see that their broader perspective, the lens they've developed over time, is influencing how they perceive things. Here's the key: when someone says, I don't see it that way, it's an opportunity for growth, not just for them, but for you. It's a chance to ask, what am I missing? How might their perspective help me see the situation differently? That shift can transform challenges into learning moments. Think about a challenge you're facing right now. Maybe it's a situation at work, a project that feels overwhelming, or a relationship that's been strained. Here's my question: how are you looking at it? Are you seeing it as a roadblock? Hmm. Or could it be a stepping stone to something greater? Take a moment to ask yourself, what's the bigger picture here? How would this challenge help me grow? Sometimes just shifting the way we look at a challenge opens the door to solutions we couldn't see before. And that brings me to a space where perspective and perception show up the most, our relationships. Wow. And trust me, this is an area where even small shifts in perspective can make a big difference. Whether it's in business, friendships, or marriage, the way we interpret someone's actions or words can define the relationship. This fits perfectly into relationships where differing perceptions and perspectives are common. In relationships, hearing someone say, I don't see it that way, can feel like a roadblock. It can feel personal. But what if it's actually a doorway? Think about it. When someone disagrees, they may not be rejecting you, but just offering a different perspective. The challenge is to listen without judgment and to ask, what can I learn from their point of view? For example, I work with people who saw things completely different from me. I bet you have too. Early on, I used to take it personally or assume they were just wrong. But over time, I realized their words, I don't see it that way, may be a gift. They forced me to reconsider my own perspective and often to grow as a result. Here's something I've learned: listening doesn't mean agreeing, it means being open to the idea that someone else's perspective might have value. Think about your own relationships. Okay. Look, maybe it's a colleague, a friend, or even your spouse. The next time you hear, I don't see it that way, instead of getting defensive, try asking, tell me more. How do you see it? All right. You might not agree with their perspective, but you may learn something. Okay. And here's the magic: when you show people that you're willing to listen, you strengthen the relationship, even if you don't see things exactly the same way. It's not about winning the argument, it's about growing the connection. Now, let's talk about parenting, because if there's one area in life where your perspective or constantly uh, dealing with things is always challenged and shaped, parenting is such a powerful teacher of perspective. As parents, we often feel like we're the ones doing the teaching. We set the rules, we guide, we correct. But, if we are paying attention, our kids can teach us maybe just as much sometimes, and maybe even more too. I remember a time when one of my kids came to me with a decision that they were struggling with. My first instinct was to step in and fix it. That's what we do, right? I didn't tell them what to do. I just gave them the tools to see things from a different perspective. And you know what? They figured it out on their own. Okay. And seeing them take ownership of that decision, not because I told them what to do, but because they learned how to think it through, was a proud moment for me. All right. Look, there's another situation. My dad, was an auto mechanic. All right. He did a lot of things. One of them was a very, very talented auto mechanic. And, he used to try to teach me how to fix cars. And I didn't pay a whole lot of attention, while I'm supposed to be doing one thing, I was probably playing with rocks or something. But as I got older, I can remember calling my dad up and saying, hey, Dad, such and such is going on with my car. Can you fix it for me? He said, bring it over here. And I'm like, great, my dad's gonna fix my car. So I bring my car to my dad, and he says, okay, get down under it. I was like, get under it? I don't know what to do. He said, I'll tell you what to do. I'm not getting on the ground. I was like, but Dad, I don't really know what to do. He said, I'll tell you what to do. Now, listen, from I had perceived that he was going to take care of that for me. So that was my perception, that he was going to take care. And I had, just perceived that. And then from my perspective, he wasn't doing me right by putting me under that car. All right. But from his perspective, it was better for me to learn by doing than for him doing for me. And by him teaching me things like that, I learned a lot about how to do things with my hands and take care of some things and so forth. So, hey, listen, my perception, and looking at things from my perspective was one thing, but from his perspective, he perceived that if he showed me what to do and told me what to do, as opposed to doing it for me, would be better for me, better for him too, I guess. Okay. Here's the thing, as parents, we often want to shield our kids from pain or failure, but sometimes the greatest gift we can give them is the space to grow and learn. So let me ask you, how has parenting taught you to see the world differently? Maybe it's realizing that your kids see the world through their own lens and not yours. Or maybe it's learning to listen before you correct. Not always easy, but here's a thought. The next time your child says, I don't see it that way, instead of getting frustrated, ask them to explain. You might not only learn something about their perspective, you might learn something about yourself. Listen, finally, let's bring it back to you, because the way you look at your life, especially through self reflection, can transform your past into a tool for your future. Let's talk about how reframing your story can change everything. When you look back at your life, what do you see? Do you focus on the failures, the mistakes, the losses, or do you see the lessons, the growth, and the resilience you've gained? When you reframe your story, instead of seeing a chapter of your life as a failure, look, ask yourself, what did this teach me? How did it shape who I am today? How does it shape where I'm going? That shift in perspective, it isn't just healing, it's transformational. Here's something else. All right. The next time you catch yourself saying, I don't see it that way, take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself, why do I see it differently? What past experiences, emotions, or beliefs are shaping my perspective? And what might I learn if I saw it another way? Sometimes the greatest growth happens when we challenge our own assumptions and open ourselves to new perspectives. Here's an exercise for you. Think about a time in your life when you faced a big challenge. Now, write down 3 things you gained from that experience. Maybe it's resilience or a skill you learned, or even a deeper understanding of yourself. When you start seeing your past as a collection of lessons rather than mistakes, you open the door to growth. Let me ask you this. What story are you telling yourself about your life? And more importantly, how can you reframe it? Because when you change the way you see your story, you change the way you live it. So let's bring it all together. All right. Here's my challenge for you this week. Think about a challenge you're facing right now. Maybe it's at work. Maybe it's in a relationship, or maybe it's within yourself. Okay. How can you reframe it? What's one way you can turn it into a stepping stone instead of a roadblock? And as you go through this week, I want you to really pay attention to the moments when someone says to you, I don't see it that way. Don't let that be the end of the conversation. Let it be the start of something deeper, whether it's with them or within yourself. Because here's the truth. growth doesn't happen when we stay in our comfort zones. It happens when we're willing to challenge our own assumptions and see things differently. When you change the way you see the world, you change the way you see you. So keep your eyes open, keep your mind curious, and keep your heart willing to grow. And remember, perspective is your power. So, hey, listen, until the next time, keep adapting, keep evolving, and keep reaching for those new horizons. Melvin Larry here, signing off. Don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and certainly comment on what you've heard today. Take care. Take charge. God bless.